Welcome to ALN Thursday at 3. Today we're going to be talking with Mark Knight, Senior Managing Consultant for 1898 and Company, and very importantly, he is the Director of Projects for the Institute of Asset Management for the USA. And before we get started talking with Mark about the IAM North America Conference, we're thank our patron sponsors and our organizational members, of which 1898 and Company is an organizational member. So thank you, Mark, for that. And we're also going to call out that the next ALN A55K professional certification course starts soon, and there's a seat or two left, but that has filled up pretty well. And now we're going to get into the talk. And Mark, thank you for being a replacement for Ian Cranston. Ian Cranston is president of IC Infrastructure, which is also an ALN member, and he's involved in the Institute of Asset Management. He was attending the event, but and was going to report on that, but he got sick. So Mark has a very important role at Institute of Asset Management, and part of that role is he's a liaison to the ALN. Mark is the leader of the IAM USA group that is working with the ALN on a paper on asset leadership, and that's still going in through the editing process, but it's looking really good, and we look forward to that coming out. But Mark, we've asked you to come and talk about the event. Jim Dieter set up these ALN Thursday at 3 discussions to kind of replace the casual conversations that you have in between presentations at a conference where you learn so much. And so this is an actual opportunity to really replicate that. So how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. And, I got back from the conference and was talking to somebody on Tuesday who had tested positive for COVID. And then when you called me yesterday about Ian testing positive and I had a scratchy throat, I thought I had better go do a test. But I know I'm doing well because it came back negative. And
oh, well, very good. I hope those are just very rare incidences. So the event was 4 days, or a couple of days of workshops, a couple of days of presentations and dinners, and it was in Denver. How was it?
it was good. I mean, it's the first travel I have done for a long time with the pandemic, so I found it mentally exhausting. I'm used to sitting in a quiet room, talking to people through a screen, and to have 250 people, in a large area chatting and trying to screen out all those conversations and actually shout to have a conversation with somebody with the volume, it was mentally exhausting, but it was a great conference. Like I said, there's about 250 people. As you said, the first day was all workshops and sort of working group and branch meetings, but then there was 2.5 days of conference sessions, and it was interesting to me that there was some recurring themes that kept cropping up. One of which was nothing to do with the sessions. It was the number of times you ran into people and it's like, oh, so that's what you look like in 3D. I think it's a lot of people their first or second kind of conference, but it was really good. I think that there was 3 kind of tracks that ran through the conference. One was data-driven asset management, one was building better, and the other was connecting assets to business. So I thought they were pretty good tracks. There were some good plenaries. One of the things that you might like, I mean, obviously ALN is very ISO 55000 focused, and one of the I think it may have been the first plenary session was talking about some of the journeys that it was the regional transportation district in Denver had been through. And one of the things they said was, the standard tells you what, it doesn't tell you when. And I found that very enlightening because, asset management, change management, you name it, having that strong leadership, top management support and sponsorship is really important. And it made me realize that I did a project a few years ago where we started small to build tangible results to bring management on board and get that support. And then last year I worked on something where I came in partway through and it was very obvious they didn't have the sponsorship, and I was trying to get that sponsorship, but they hadn't got those tangible results. And it was interesting to me that I could do it right one time and then make a mistake the second time. But I think the way that it was summarized there, that the standard says what, not when, was I found very interesting. Also, Ryan LaRue, I'm not sure if you talked with Ryan on these sessions before, but Ryan, he talked about the work the Michigan Infrastructure Council was doing, which was great. There was also another plenary on data as a strategic asset, which I don't think anybody's going to argue too much about. There was another one on connecting assets to businesses, a plenary from the city of Calgary. That was kind of fascinating, actually, because they stop me if I'm just kind of too randomly here, Mike, but I'm just kind of going through the points as they come back to me. But they were looking at where to invest and how much in different communities. So they actually put some of the onus back in the communities and came up with like a star rating for some of their projects, like residential parks for kids. So do you want a one-star park, which it's got a pathway through it and somewhere to leave your car, but not much else, and maybe they don't clean up after the dogs? Or do you want the full 5-star with the shredded rubber under the swing sets and the manicured grass? And what they found was some of the communities were saying, well, 2 stars pretty good, that's all we need, it's a safe environment for the kids to go play, and that's really what we want. But then the city's saving money, and other communities are saying, well, we're going to go for the 4-star. And now some of the communities that have, kind of gone with a 2-star approach are looking at other communities and saying, well, hang on, all the money we saved is going to those guys. So, if you look at the kind of 3 pillars or circles of the triple bottom line and the way they intersect, as they get squeezed together over time, the intersections between all of these, just like we talk about breaking down silos within the discipline of asset management, I think the interactions within those triple bottom line parameters, they're going to start influencing each other, and you're going to start seeing things like Calgary looked at, and now they're going to have to find ways to try and look at some of those impacts that maybe they hadn't thought about. That was a really interesting talk. There was also one from Dr. David Raff at the Bureau of Reclamation. Just the sheer scale of what they have to manage is staggering. And then one thing that came back to me hard this week, I think, an internal email I saw where somebody wasn't too worried about getting involved in the meeting because it was asset management, and like, do we think leaders and finance people are going to be interested in that as a topic? Which you and I know the answer is absolutely yes. And to prove that point, really interesting talk from somebody from the District of Columbia, and they've been looking at their fleet. So when you get your bonus at the end of the year, Mike, and you go out and buy a base Lamborghini or something like that for whatever it is, $100,000. I'm driving around $100,000 car, like we all do, right? An ambulance is $250,000. A single ambulance, and the city's got fleets of those to manage. It's got all the police vehicles as well, the fire equipment. By demonstrating that the city had a well-structured, formalized approach to asset management, Moody's actually upgraded them from AA to AAA, which increased their borrowing power by $200 million. All through proving that they had a structured approach to asset management, which I thought was fantastic. And
Yes, that's a great,
I'm trying to remember what other sessions there were. But
well, you mentioned Parks and Recreation. What city was that?
that was Calgary.
What was the story they were saying? Oh, that was the story about the parks and some people chose two-star and didn't get to keep their extra money. Yeah, so a system has to be in place so that if a community saves its money in one area, they get to see the savings as opposed to it going somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't talk to him afterwards, so I'm not 100% clear on how that worked, whether it was their money going to other communities or just the other communities decided to spend more. Yeah, it may have been a perception thing more than anything. But it was,
Well,
it was
yeah.
it was a good
And
conference.
perception being reality. We've had Calgary speak and a great story about Mr. Witten told us about transportation. The roads people were asking for money, the trains people were asking for money, the bus people were asking for more money, the highway people were asking for more money. And they said, wait a second, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to get people from one end of town to the other. And our most important times are during rush hour. And if we contract with Uber and subsidize Uber drivers, then we don't need to add buses. We don't need to add trains. We don't need to expand the highways. We can deal with it that way. So once they stood back and looked at the idea or the problem in a different way, they were able to come up with a very effective solution. And seems like they almost got there with parks, but have a little bit of dissatisfied stakeholders were the ones who chose to go with the two-star.
Yeah, and that's an interesting story you tell, because it was actually Steve that was talking about the park system. And I think the Uber story is interesting as well, because it comes back to focusing on what the outcomes are you're trying to achieve, and the assets are a way of achieving that. So if you focus too much on the assets rather than on the outcomes, because I mean, asset management is, as we know, the coordinated activity to realize value from assets. You realize value from the assets by giving stakeholders what they want. And it sounds like Calgary was pretty far forward thinking with that. He also told us about a bridge, a pedestrian walkway they built over the river, which was very, very expensive. Looks awesome, but brings in, I forget what the numbers were. It was something like 1 million people a year. Just tourists come in to look at the bridge and walk across it. But a disgruntled stakeholder, taxpayer, it's a kind of long metal tube with kind of triangular holes in it, but it's lined with glass on the inside. And somebody walked down the length of the bridge, smashing the glass panels because he didn't like the way his tax dollars were invested. So now the city's got to take a whole new approach to what they want to do with that, which is kind of sad, because it was actually, although it was very expensive, it was generating revenue for them.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate that one bad apple can ruin something like that and cause more tax money to be spent on bulletproof glass next time or something. I don't know.
But I think some of the recurring themes that came up were sustainability came up a lot in the presentations and discussion, and also value. I think value is one of those words that obviously it's in the definition of asset management. It's the value of value and tying that to asset management to business was a popular theme.
We have a comment that if the bridge was delivering value, then stakeholders should not be upset. Unfortunately, we're dealing with the public, and should does not apply, and people can get upset in the public for things that have nothing to do with reality. So part of government is dealing with that dissension. It's unfortunate when it comes to personal property destruction. So some of the themes that you were seeing are themes that we were seeing at the Asset Leadership Network event, and the difference between resilience and sustainability was coming clear. And was resilience being mentioned at all?
It did actually. This is kind of you're sure you weren't there. So yes, resilience actually came up in a sustainable development presentation, and I know that because it was it was a session I was actually presenting at. So the Institute of Asset Management spent the last couple of years working on guidelines for sustainable development, because that's one of the 39 areas from the Global Forum that constitutes asset management. And one of the questions was, did the group specifically look at resilience in developing the guidelines? And the answer was no. I think part of the reason for that is I love resilience, and being part of the team that helped work on the guidelines, I think I would have dragged us down a very deep rabbit hole. But I paraphrased the question that the person had asked, and it was basically, can you have sustainability without resilience? And before I had a chance to answer that, somebody in the audience said no. My response to that was, well, I don't think I can really come up with a good argument to disagree with that. But we do, I think, one of the other groups in the IM is also looking at climate emergency, and obviously, climate emergency, sustainability, resilience, there's an awful lot of overlap between those areas. I don't think we've done a good job of getting all those people together to kind of do that crosstalk.
Yeah, there is overlap, but there's the subtle differences. And in addition to having similar themes, we had similar presenters. We had DC government presenting on what they're doing, and that was just a real highlight of our event. Sounds like that was a good one there.
Yeah.
Richard Dietz is quite the rock star. He has got things figured out pretty clearly.
But from the Moody's rating, I mean, I don't think you or I, or people on this call, need convincing that asset management is a good thing. But when you see that kind of impact from somebody like Moody's, that's a huge endorsement, and that will wake a few people up, I think.
Yeah, we had Richard Dietz last night speaking with on our value and benefits from asset management program with the Australians Asset Management Council, and insurance came up.
Mm-hmm.
And in Australia, they've got asset management down good enough that insurance companies can come in and look at your asset management system and determine if you deserve a better rate of insurance, just like DC government got a better bond rating. And we're trying to figure out ways to bring that into the US and North America. Was there any discussion about insurance by any chance?
Not in the sessions I was in, but that's something that I've been interested in for a long time as a reason to persuade people that they should be focusing more on asset management. I mean, going off topic a little bit, but if there's a football game on Saturday or Sunday you're interested in, you can watch hours of commentator debate on TV and get 15 different answers to who's going to win, or you can go look up the betting odds, because the people who come up with the betting odds are the people who are going to live or die by whether they get the answer right. When you start looking at asset reliability, insurance underwriters, again, for what they're willing to share, those people really understand the value of asset management, and they know the cost of getting it wrong as well. So yeah, if you can demonstrate that you have a good framework for asset management, you've got a documented process, and you're making objective decisions, if you're heavily capitalized as a business, then that should be a case for lowering your insurance rates.
Well, once we get the leadership paper finished, let's maybe have IAM and ALN talk to insurance companies in North America, see what we can get going there.
I would be interested in that. I wonder how much they would be willing to share, but maybe at the kind of concept level, we could do something interesting there.
Well, Gallagher Insurance is based in suburbs of Chicago, and they're big in Australia, and they're doing this. So what I've found out so far is that their Australian unit is totally separate from their US unit. So it would be a matter of trying to get the Australian people to present to the Americans. So there's got to be a bottom line value, and we can figure out how to present that. So this is getting very much to be like the conversations in between events. David Brewer from Jacobs says insurance underwriters equals risk managers. And so that puts it right straight into the asset management world. So we'll get David Brewer involved in our insurance board when we get that rolling. But you said you presented. So what did you present on?
Yeah, sustainable development, but what the IAM's been doing on that.
And what were you saying in your presentation?
It was really just an overview of some of the things and in the document and the path getting there. I mean, one of the things we found as a group that we were doing early on was kind of weaving the use of the term sustainability and sustainable development until we called a timeout and said, these are two different things. We've got to figure out what we're talking about. And I think if you look at the definitions, I mean, the simple way to describe it is that sustainable development is the pathway to sustainability. I think some of the other things that came out of that was, it's going to involve a lot of thinking and work at both ends of the life cycles. If you think of a linear life cycle, there's an awful lot of work you've got to do at the front end of that to figure out, the impact of the asset, the services it's delivering, the cost of that, but also what's going to happen at end of life cycle. And one of the subtle changes I saw in the IAM's life cycle loop in its conceptual model that's in the new maturity document is, instead of being an almost closed loop, it's now a closed loop. And instead of dispose at the end, it's dispose or reuse. I forget the exact language. So we can either repurpose assets, or I mean, we've always had the ability to refurbish them and kind of move them back into more mid-life cycle phase, to continue that O&M piece. But now we can take assets and put them into a completely, repurpose them for different use, different industry, different business, and start a new life cycle. Ultimately, they're going to have to be decommissioned, but trying to figure all that stuff out ahead of time is going to be really difficult. And the other thing we talked a little bit about, without giving it answers, was KPI, because like anything else, people are going to ask, if you've got sustainability goals, how well are you doing? So we actually referenced some European work in terms of general things to consider when putting together KPI, but then a list of measures for things that people can possibly involve. And again, it comes back to using a combination of leading and lagging indicators. Performance as a lagging indicator. I mean, I think capital can be a leading indicator, but it's also a good lagging indicator in terms of looking at what you have been spending. I think a good leading indicator with this kind of stuff is policy. If there's policy incentives for this kind of stuff, then people are going to start adopting it. And I think for the consultants among us that aren't fully paying attention to the sustainable development world, it's going to come back and impact us through our clients, whether it's government, utilities, municipalities and so forth. But clients that are close to their customers and engage with them, I guess you can argue whether governments do that or not, but they are going to have sustainable development requirements in their contracts, and those are going to flow down to us. So we have to be, really paying attention to that.
Well, that's great. So you've got a really interesting background. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about it. That's a staged photo.
Oh, this back, yeah. Oh, this is just a fake background. Yes, I change them all the time. Can you read the quote?
Not with my eyes.
It's you'll like it. It's one of those ones you hear attributed to Deming, but I can't actually find any evidence that he actually said it. But without data, you're just another person with an opinion.
With a what?
Without data, you're just another person with an opinion.
With an opinion, yes. So then also 1898 plays up well. Want to give you some time to talk about the work you're doing at 1898?
Sure. I mean, as it says in the unreadable little subtext under the logo, 1898 is a part of Burns and McDonnell. So for people who don't know, Burns and McDonnell's a large engineering company in Kansas City, about 10,000 people. So we build a lot of stuff, airport terminals, water plants, substations. I think we're building out the runway infrastructure for the structure in Europe for the B-21 and all kinds of interesting stuff. But 18, so Burns and McDonnell's got 10 divisions, 9 of which build stuff and do consulting around those building activities. The 10th division is 1898. 1898 doesn't build anything. It's just a consulting organization. So we do a lot of work with electric utilities, and electric utilities is what my background is mostly in. So, I think as you will have seen through ALN members that you interact with, some utilities, I think globally utilities are pretty well on board with ISO 55000. In the US, it's been a bit slower, but there have been some really good examples of utilities that have embraced that. But the ones that haven't decided to go to certification, we're seeing a lot more interest in those in utilities aligning with what's in ISO 55000. So I like that. So when we're working with them, we'll try, if they haven't got a policy, we'll offer one to them. Write something up. Like you've got to start getting into the practice of documenting everything you do, like any kind of best practice framework. Document what you do, see if it works. Make sure people are aware of 55,000. Obviously, I mentioned the IM, 39 subjects and stuff to them as well. But this combination of asset management, but also other things going on like grid modernization. So if you don't know what the state of the electric grid is, don't take a look. A lot of it, like most of our infrastructure here with bridges and dams and roads, it's a lot of it's pretty ancient. A lot of very long-lived assets, but some of those assets now are getting replaced with smarter assets that are functionally equivalent, but can self-diagnose and make decisions themselves on some of the protection schemes and stuff like that.
Excellent. Well, we're looking to have some programs on policy in the near future, so we'll definitely reach out to you for your ideas on asset management policy.
Keep it. Actually, I'd forgotten this, so you've just reminded me. So a couple of the presenters at 2 of the sessions did talk about their approach to asset management policy. And I'm not sure if one of them, I don't think one of them was Steve, but they were basically, I think at least one of them was a municipal organization, and they had an interesting chart that had the layers of management structure and how often they changed. And when you looked at that as a timeline, they were somebody at one of the 3 or 4 levels was changing every year at a minimum, which made having consistent practices difficult, because everybody comes in and says, why are you doing this, and challenging it. So they basically said what we need is a policy that's focused on principles, not on specifics, because to have somebody come in, if you're focused on delivering safer, better value to customers, nobody can really come in and say, well, that's stupid, I disagree with that, let's come up with a new policy. So that was policy that's based on principles, I think sounds like a very sound idea.
All right. Well, we'll talk with you about that. And I really want to thank you very much for stepping in. Pitch. He was sick and he was really bad. So in reverse order, we want to say thank you to and then everything went black. Okay, here we go. And thank you to our guest, Mark Knight, organizational members in no particular order, our patron members, and all of you who joined us today. Thank you for your comments and thank you for attending. We'll see you next week.